Hi, I'm John Clifton. Let me tell you how I got interested in pet vaccines. Several years ago, we had a dog named Sparky. He was diagnosed with canine lymphoma when he was 5 years old. Lymphoma is generally incurable in dogs. Sparky had a year of chemotherapy, and we also treated him with many natural remedies. Long story short, he went into remission and miraculously remained cancer-free for his full lifespan of nearly 15 years. When that year of chemo was over, our oncologist told us that Sparky must never have another vaccine for the rest of his life. Well, I thought this was strange. Aren't vaccines supposed to protect the dog? Why no vaccines? The reason I learned was that vaccines lower the immune system, and a lowered immune system can be an open door for cancer to get a foothold. Then I started wondering why Sparky got cancer in the first place. Some friends of mine were suggesting I should look into the possibility that Sparky had been over-vaccinated. Well, I looked back through his medical records, starting with his breeder, the early veterinarians, and up to what was then the present. What I saw was that our first vet had duplicated the shots the breeder's vet had given him. Following that came a lot of shots that at that time I didn't even have any knowledge about. I started to research the topic of pet vaccinations, and the more I learned, the more I realized the need for a simple guide that would reflect the thoughts and warnings of the leading veterinary associations, veterinary schools, and veterinary experts and authors. After devoting a full year to the research, I began the writing of Stop the Shots, Our Vaccinations Killing Our Pets. I wanted to give the pros and cons, not simply write another anti-vaccine book, and let readers decide for themselves the course they should follow. Now, we all think of vaccines as being disease fighters, and they are. You give your dog a parvo shot, and that dog most likely won't get parvo. But now I'd like to show you how many believe that vaccines can also be disease inviters, triggering the appearance of all sorts of maladies, from allergies to cancer. More vaccines are coming out all the time. The vaccine industry seems to love new diseases that they can tell you they have a new vaccine for. Many owners of dogs and cats, if not most, simply aren't aware of the possible dangers inherent in immunizations. Those annual booster shots that seem so taken for granted have got to be questioned in light of what is now known. The laws of localities that mandate too frequent, sometimes annual rabies shots have got to be abolished. We're simply giving too many shots too often for too many diseases, quite a few of which your pet has practically zero chance of getting. If you care about your pet, you simply can't ignore the multitude of threats that vaccines could possibly pose to each and every one of them. You can't wait until it's too late. You can't say, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Allergies. While it's true that rabies and some other diseases have been virtually eliminated in our pet population, our animals are coming down with more allergies than ever before, more stress, and most notably more cancer than they were getting even a few years ago. One study showed that in the state of New York, the cancer rate among dogs had increased 150% in 4 years. This while our air and water are actually improving. Why? If you don't know the specific dangers being claimed, it's time you educated yourself. I'd like to explain what vaccines are and how they work. I'll show you what leading immunology experts are recommending, that you can cut down on the frequency of shots and still protect your pet. I will show you how to find out what inoculations are completely unnecessary for your particular dog or cat. I'll explain how, according to much current thinking, vaccines lower the immune system, leaving your pet vulnerable to serious, sometimes fatal diseases. I'll give you the facts. I'll relate the findings of leading veterinarians, experts, and the results of pertinent surveys. I'll tell you why many breeders have abandoned vaccinations completely. I'm not going to tell you to never again vaccinate your pet, although a good many are choosing that route nowadays. On the other hand, I'm not going to tell you, as many believe, that vaccinations are the best way to go. But I hope to lay out the pros and cons. It's my intention to help every pet owner make informed intelligent decisions about which vaccinations to give, which to avoid, and why. I don't want to turn you against your veterinarian, but I would like to turn you into a better educated consumer as far as vaccinations are concerned. No medical profession is infallible. That's why second opinions were invented. Some veterinarians, I admit, seem to be totally unconcerned about possible dangers, sending out those time for Max's annual booster shots notices with the regularity of dentists who mail regular checkup time postcards. Other vets, not always as visible, are as concerned as I about the permanent damage that vaccinations could be capable of causing. So I'm going to make some suggestions about how you can put the brakes on those vets who are inclined to overdo the shots, without seeming to challenge their competence. Remember that a veterinarian can be a perfectly ethical individual, but is not financially motivated to discontinue or give fewer inoculations. It's currently estimated that giving shots constitutes 50% of a typical veterinarian's practice. If you feel your duck needs to be reined in, you will have to take the reins. I've heard so many stories about folks who go into the vet's office fully intending to cut back on the shots, but then the vet talks them into it, saying, "You wouldn't want to risk Rex getting kennel cough, etc., etc. Better play it safe." As editor of a monthly e-zine on canine cancer and co-author of a book dealing with that subject, I get heart-wrenching letters nearly every day from dog owners devastated by the recent diagnosis of cancer in their beloved best friends. And I'm sure that owners of cancer cats are just as devastated. I have been there myself, and I hope to sound an alert to all pet owners everywhere. Learn the facts. Beware the dangers, and until you've sorted it all out for yourself and come to your own conclusions, stop the shots. Is it all about money? Is it all about vaccine manufacturers, the huge businesses of wholesalers and retailers, the pet store chains, and the veterinary business? Is that what's driving pet owners to vaccinate? Well, first, let's take a closer look at vaccines and what they are. The word vaccine is derived from vacca, Latin for cow. That's because the first vaccine, developed by a guy named Edward Jenner in England in 1796, it came from cowpox, a disease in cows, the virus of which was developed into a human smallpox vaccine. Today, the term is used for any preparation administered by mouth, injection, or nasal spray sometimes, that is designed to produce antibodies against any one of a number of diseases. Now, what's in there? Vaccines are typically made using the viruses of bacteria of a particular disease. Sometimes these microorganisms have been killed, other times they've only been weakened a bit. Sometimes the vaccine contains only a bit of the protein from the virus. These are called recombinant vaccines, and they avoid introducing the actual disease into the body. For example, a human flu shot will contain flu virus, typically a killed virus. The idea is to introduce a small quantity of the disease into the body. This, in turn, stimulates the immune system to respond, be the virus dead carcasses or live little organisms. Little guys called antigens go running around sounding the alarm that a stranger has entered the body. They inform other little guys that turn into little warriors called antibodies. Now, these antibodies are specifically trained on the spot to fight the specific virus. But after they've destroyed the invader, the antibodies don't fold up their tents. They hang around, just in case more of those enemies come back. Basically, that's what immunity is, having those antibodies around, ready to nip that virus in the bud should it ever return. Additionally, the immune system puts a profile on each individual enemy it encounters into its own, what I call, enemy database. These are called memory cells. Now, these cells can survive for years, even after the antibody warriors have died natural deaths. thus prolonging immunity. There are three basic types of immunity. Mucosal immunity works in the mucous linings of the digestive, urinary, respiratory, and mammary tracts, preventing invaders from entering the body. Humoral immunity works in the body's fluid sources, mainly the blood, producing antibodies against invaders. Cellular immunity works in the individual cells, keeping records from past experiences with invaders and recognizing them if they should ever return. It is this system that produces the symptoms of disease, fever, diarrhea, rashes, etc. When a person or an animal gets a vaccination, it starts of what I think of as a little war in the body. The immune system gets real busy. Getting busy takes energy. All those antigens responding to the alarm, all those antibodies being created. Many contend that this consumption of energy and resources creates a temporary weakness. We say the immune system has been lowered, or worse, compromised. So that's the paradox. In order to strengthen immunity, the system has to be weakened for a time. Almost all agree on this. It can be clearly demonstrated that the number of white cells in the blood is diminished after a vaccination. Now, many knowledgeable folks contend that during that window of weakness, that I call it, bad things can happen. It's hard for an army to fight on too many fronts at once. Resources are stretched to the breaking point. And so it is with the immune system. Remember, it doesn't know that this is just a vaccine it's dealing with. It thinks it's the real disease and responds accordingly. And if this army called the immune system has to deal with multiple enemies, well, you get the idea. Multivalent vaccines. A veterinarian recently told me about seeing a puppy, Alfie, who had been previously vaccinated by another vet. According to the dog's medical record, the first vet had given the poor little thing 3 shots at once when he was only a few weeks old. That's creating a pretty major war, and at a time when the animal's immune system wasn't fully developed. I wouldn't be surprised to hear that Alfie got cancer or another serious disease. Believe it or not, there's a 7-in-1 vaccine cocktail, and it's not unusual to hear that this concoction is given to very young puppies. Some say, so what's wrong with that? It's been shown that the immune system is perfectly capable of fending off many diseases at once. Others say, are you kidding? The effects of over-vaccinating might not appear at first. In fact, they may not be felt for several generations, but the damage is done now. Since I wrote Stop the Shots, I've had 3 individuals report to me that their dog died immediately or shortly after getting one of those 5-in-1 or 6-in-1 shots they give on Saturdays in one of those big pet store chains. Adjuvants. Enough controversy? You want more? Besides the actual viral or bacterial organisms in vaccines, there can be other stuff in there as well. Many vaccines contain adjuvants. Adjuvants are immune system boosters put there to encourage the body to fight the disease the vaccine is meant to prevent. Sometimes the adjuvant can cause inflammation on the site of the injection. The inflammation causes free radicals. These are dangerously incomplete atoms. I'm sure you've heard of free radicals. It causes them to circulate in the area, which can mess up the DNA in the inflamed region and even cause cancer at the place where the needle went in. Such a sarcoma, called site-specific, is often deadly. Cats are particularly susceptible to vaccine-associated sarcomas, VAS they call it. Preservatives. Preservatives can also be added to vaccines. In the past, mercury was often used for this purpose, producing the results you might expect from such a toxic substance and creating a public outcry. Mercury use, I'm informed, is not as prevalent today, although I've just read reports of a recent human flu vaccine containing mercury being approved by the FDA. But what might be the next additive that is discovered to be in there and found to be dangerous? Young mammals automatically carry immunities transferred to them by their mother's milk. Nature has provided that immunity to tide them over until their own immune systems mature and take over. Now, one of the tricky things is that we can't be sure exactly how long the natural protection is lasting. When it fades, a puppy will be susceptible to all kinds of diseases, many of them extremely dangerous. Vaccinations against parvo, distemper, and other diseases are usually deemed necessary during this period, and it gets to be a crucial matter as to just what to give and when. Be careful. That's what I'm saying. Many believe that the fate of the dog or cat's health later in life can be sealed by the immune measures that are taken at that early stage. And consider this no-brainer. An animal will never get a disease it's not exposed to. A puppy that isn't living with other animals and has no contact with wild animals has practically no chance of getting rabies. Why would you vaccinate any earlier than you need to? Use your common sense. There are so many unnecessary shots that are being given every day. But first, let's look at what diseases your pet could get as a result of over-vaccinating. The list of diseases that vaccinations might possibly cause would be large indeed, since the door to most all diseases is left open by immune systems that have been compromised by vaccines. Here are just a few of the diseases that some have suspected in actual cases to have been directly linked to vaccines: cancers, various types, paralysis, allergies, all sorts, leukemia, liver damage, lupus and various autoimmune disorders, parvovirus, hepatitis, parainfluenza, leptospirosis, chronic renal failure, that's kidney failure. At least one study suggests that vaccines can cause or trigger diseases directly. There was a survey done in the UK in 1996 which demonstrated that the vast majority of dogs that came down with various diseases came down with the disease within 90 days after a vaccination. Something is going on here. Should a pet owner stop all vaccinations? Some? Any? Which ones? Well, let's explore the answers. Which shots to give, which not? Some people might say when in doubt about giving a particular shot, the logical thing would be to give it. Always better to play it safe. Well, that's just wrong. That would almost be like taking pills for every disease there is, just in case you might have one of them. Be selective. In one respect, vaccinations are not that different from any other medical treatment. There are always risks that come along with the benefits. An animal overwhelmed with vaccinations will likely be far worse off than one who has received no vaccinations, a lot of people would argue. Some dog and cat breeders these days are saying that they no longer vaccinate puppies or kittens at all, and claim that, on balance, they're experiencing fewer rather than more health problems. Many opine that vaccinations actually weaken the breed due to the fact that animals never get the opportunity to fight off certain diseases naturally. When young puppies and kittens get a disease and fight it off without the aid of vaccines, their immune systems, it is argued, are left far stronger than if they had been protected by vaccines and never got the disease. This bodes for stronger offspring, and more breeders, it seems, are becoming aware of this. Despite the title of my book, Stop the Shot, I'm not personally advocating stopping all shots, but I can certainly see why some are going that way. A reader wrote me an email to say that he has dogs, cats, and horses, and none of them has ever gotten a vaccination, nor have any of them ever contracted cancer. I'd venture a guess that he lives in the country, away from the dangers of city life where diseases are so readily communicable. Still, such cases are intriguing. Other readers send similar reports. I know of no studies specifically focusing on pets that have never received vaccinations. I'd certainly welcome one of those. Many, however, particularly city dwellers, aren't willing to stop all shots. They would rather vaccinate, but with a careful, judicious approach. Now let's talk about your pet's environment, lifestyle, etc. Barring total abstinence, what shots should you give and which should you avoid? That depends on several factors, including your pet's environment, lifestyle, and medical history. But when considering any particular shot, the immediate question you should ask yourself is, what are the chances my pet will ever be exposed to this disease? Just remember, one size does not fit all. Here is a partial list of diseases you could possibly vaccinate your pet against. Vaccine manufacturers are coming up with new vaccines all the time, so this is not an all-inclusive list, but it should give you some idea of what's out there today. These are for dogs. There's dogs and cats in the book, but for now, because of time, let's just do some dog diseases. Rabies, canine distemper, parvovirus, bordetella, sometimes called kennel cough, adenovirus, which is hepatitis, parainfluenza, coronavirus, leptospirosis, Lyme disease, giardia. Rabies, Latin for rage, is a viral disease that causes acute encephalitis in animals and people. In humans, rabies is almost always fatal once full-blown symptoms have developed, but prompt vaccination after exposure usually prevents symptoms from developing. Rabies shots for dogs and cats are usually required by law in the United States as well as many foreign countries. The laws are intended ultimately not to protect the animals, but to protect humans who could possibly be infected from animal bites. Human rabies is quite rare in the United States. Only 27 cases have been reported in people in the United States since 1990. 90% of rabies occurs in wild animals. Now, in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, however, rabies remains a substantial threat to animals and people. Bats commonly carry rabies. Distemper and parvovirus both cause severe vomiting and diarrhea and are often fatal in young animals. Bordetella, or kennel cough as it's called, is contracted in kennels and shelters and is considered curable with antibiotics. Adenovirus and parainfluenza are respiratory illnesses, like the common cold, flu, that sort of thing. Coronavirus is a highly contagious disease infecting the intestinal tract, stomach trouble. Leptospirosis is a contagious, possibly fatal disease, often affecting the liver, the kidney. Lyme disease in animals is similar to the disease in humans, and symptoms can include fever, lameness, soreness, listlessness, loss of appetite, swollen glands and joints. Giardia is a microscopic parasite and it's difficult to get rid of. A study of cats deliberately infected with the parasite, done by the Colorado State University, indicated that the vaccine for Giardia was totally ineffective. It was suggested, however, that the vaccine might have a beneficial effect on cats naturally infected. So you got to pick your shots. That's quite a menu. Which vaccine should you give and which not? For starters, you can weed the list out by answering yes or no to the following questions. That will leave you with a shorter list to evaluate further. Just answer yes or no to these. Yes or no. Did I just adopt my dog from a shelter or just get my pet from a breeder? If yes, then the shelter or breeder is possibly already vaccinated for bordetella. Check to make sure. Don't repeat this shot. In fact, check previous shot records for all rescues and puppies. Will I be boarding my pet with other dogs or cats? If no, omit bordetella. Does my pet live in or will she be traveling to an area where Lyme disease is endemic? If no, eliminate Lyme disease. Do I want to keep vaccinations to the bare minimum, eliminating shots for diseases that usually can be cured, and paying special attention to my pet's general health? For dogs, if yes, eliminate all but rabies, parvovirus, and canine distemper. For cats, if yes, eliminate all but rabies, panleukopenia, and rhinotracheatis calcivirus. Now, note, many choose to vaccinate puppies and kittens with these core vaccines only, according to recommended schedules, up until their pets reach 12 months old. Then discontinue shots entirely thereafter for the life of the animal. Many do that. Shots the first year, the typical shots, and then nothing after that. Do I want to eliminate shots that have not been proven to offer protection? If yes, eliminate Giardia, canine coronavirus, and feline infectious peritonitis. Do I want to eliminate all shots except what the law requires? If yes, eliminate all but rabies. Then start concentrating on keeping your animal in top health using diet, supplements, exercise, and regular checkups. Okay, now the question is, do I repeat the shots? And how often? How frequent? People assume that every shot sooner or later wears out. Therefore, you have to repeat them every year. You hear so much about annual booster shots. Annual booster shots. Please forget the phrase annual booster shots. These three words just don't belong together. Regular annual shots don't make any sense and should be completely abolished. So why then are some veterinarians still sending out those time for your annual shots notices? The American Veterinary Medical Association, in its Principles of Vaccination Guidelines, this is from 2001, states, unnecessary stimulation of the immune system does not result in enhanced disease resistance and may increase the risk of adverse post-vaccination events. Unnecessary stimulation of the immune system does not result in enhanced disease resistance and may increase the risk of adverse post-vaccination events. In other words, if your pet is already immune to something, giving an additional shot for it won't improve matters. On the contrary. Scheduling vaccinations is a matter of repeating shots at the widest sensible intervals. Never repeat a shot if it's clear that the previous one is still capable of offering protection. Personally, I would err on the side of waiting too long rather than not waiting long enough. Truth be told, the facts aren't in on just how long individual vaccinations remain effective. And who knows if the same time periods apply to all animals, all breeds. There are studies being done, and more is known today than, say, 10 years ago. But one thing is clear. The more this topic is studied, the more we are finding that shots last longer than we originally thought. It's now claimed that live virus shots last for life and never have to be repeated. Distemper shots are always live virus, so can't we assume that they never have to be repeated? Am I missing something? Most other vaccinations last several years. There is a killed rabies vaccine now that is labeled as lasting 3 years. I wouldn't be surprised to hear one day that this has been up to 5 or 7 years, or life. The studies just aren't in yet. Studies done at the University of Wisconsin Veterinary Teaching Hospital show that vaccines for parvovirus, distemper, and hepatitis protect for at least 7 years. This should tell you something about the value of annual boosters for at least these 3 diseases. When you receive those annual postcards from your veterinarian to come in and get those annual boosters, first determine if there will be any shots given that aren't really necessary, such as, say, Bordetella, which is considered a curable disease. Then ask how can it be shown that the old shot for, say, rabies isn't still protecting. Don't get me wrong, it's always good to get an annual checkup. These visits are a good way to detect trouble early. It's just that the yearly ritual doesn't have to include shots. So when you get one of those little reminders, make the appointment, but question the shots. So now, you're going to have your pet vaccinated or revaccinated. Time to prepare. What do you do before you vaccinate? Now, even if your animal is in the best of health, it's still best to prime your pet for a shot. Mainly, actively boost the immune system. And secondly, make sure he's not under any special stress. You'll find the details on this in my book. Now your furry family member is all set to be vaccinated, but it might be a repeat shot we're talking about. That infamous booster shot. Is the vaccination even necessary? You can test your dog's immunity. It's not good to give a vaccination when there's already immunity for the disease. But how do you tell if there is immunity? The test veterinarians use to determine immunity is called a titer test. It's a simple blood test to see how many antibodies for a particular disease are present. You can ask your veterinarian about this, and I strongly recommend them instead of giving shots that might be totally unnecessary. Veterinary associations. So far, this has been pretty much my take on things. You might want to check out the authorities on the subject. There are 3 principal organizations that sponsor studies and report on recent findings regarding veterinary vaccines. These are the American Animal Hospital Association, AAHA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, AVMA, and the American Association of Feline Practitioners, the AAFP. All 3 publish guidelines reflecting the current thinking and findings in their respective veterinary communities. You will find more complete information on their findings in Stop the Shots. In fact, the book was largely based upon these studies and recommendations. Also, many university schools of veterinary medicine also publish detailed guidelines and recommendations regarding canine and feline vaccines. Use your favorite search engine with particular attention to university veterinary school guidelines and studies. My book's website at stoptheshots.com also has much useful information and an email address you can use to contact me. Thanks for watching, and remember to stop the shots until you've thoroughly informed yourself.